Good afternoon to all, and a special welcome to our Airmen in the Fight series that we're going to continue and I think do more and more of, and they become pretty productive. I'm your host, Orville Wright. I'm your AFA president, and today's program, again, is something very special for us as General Mike Mobile Holmes wraps up incredible Air Force career and his time as the commander of Air Combat Command. Sir, we can't thank you enough. It's also important for me, and I cannot thank our sponsors enough as I go through the number of sponsors that are with us today and help us make this kind of dialogue in an effort, always a commitment to strengthen the Air Force and industry team, the warfighter and industry team. So in alphabetical order, thanks to Collins Aerospace, Elbit America, General Dynamics, GE Aviation, L3 Harris, Lockheed Martin, Next Era Energy, Oracle, Pratt & Whitney, the Pentagon Federal Credit Union, the Roosevelt Group, and SAIC. Well, again, Mobile, welcome to our Airmen in the Fight series, and your career really is incredible, exemplary. 39 years in uniform, commanded every conceivable level, 4,000 flight hours, including more than 500 combat hours, and all of those in the F-15C. I'll probably ask you later if you like the C model better than the A model, but that'll be your perspective to offer. We can start, if you would, wherever you'd like to talk today to this wonderful gathering, this roll call. But as a question to start off, where do you see the state and the readiness of our fighter fleet, our combat air forces fleet today, and a little bit of a perspective on what you see over the horizon? So, General Holmes, over to you, and thanks again for being with us today.
Well, thanks, Orville. I think my Strike Eagle teammates, so you're right, most of my flying was in the C, about 3,000 of those hours, but about half the combat time is in the E as a wing commander of Bagram. So I'll get that straight so I don't get typed in comments when we get started. If you look at the readiness across Air Combat Command, and if you look at the airplanes and the fleet that we're maintaining, the Air Force, with help from the Congress and the Department of Defense after the Budget Control Act was repealed, started putting, well, not repealed, but we got extra money, put an investment into our readiness to try to drive investment in sustainment that would let us fly more. And over the last couple of years, we had achieved about a 10, 12, 15% growth in readiness every year. And in Air Combat Command, our goal was to have all our wings organized, trained, and equipped and resourced to be able to fly to their RAP by the end of next month, by the end of September 20, 2020, sorry. And we were on track and making good progress toward meeting that goal, and then COVID happened. So as a result of COVID, we slowed down some of our local flying operations to go to silver and blue teams to try to protect our folks and to protect their families. And so we've flown at less than that program rate that we would like to fly. So at that level, our readiness has probably stayed close to the same through COVID, but we lost that little bit of extra gain that we would have liked to have made. But on the larger level, there's a couple of challenges that we face out there. And because we have a operator shortage across the Air Force, which underneath that, there's a pilot shortage, and underneath that, there's a fighter aircrew shortage, and underneath that, there's an experienced fighter aircrew shortage. We kind of have two big problems, and one is at the squadron level, trying to balance the experience level in the squadrons as we're adding inexperienced people in to try to address our shortfall, and they require upgrades. And then we had a above planned deployment cycle for the last year or so, and that's taken away some of the home station time to do those upgrades, which has made the problem a little bit worse. And so we're fighting a battle in the squadrons every day to balance between bringing new people in and absorbing them and making them experienced fighter crew members, and maintaining the experience level to meet our doc statements and the readiness we'd like to have. So that's one problem at the squadron level. But then there's an institutional problem, which is addressing that shortage that we have, which means that we have to produce, and we have to produce more pilots and navigators and special mission aviators and air battle managers and all the people that operate in the air across Air Combat Command, because every year we don't produce them is another year that there's a hole and we won't have enough. So we're having to balance those two problems. It's what people call a wicked problem, which means you can't solve it separate. You can't break it down into individual pieces. You have to try to solve it across the board. And so we're asking our squadron leaders and their IPs and the flight commanders and the people that are out there managing training to manage that problem, and to take our inexperienced folks and make sure that they get the extra training they need before they take on the more complicated tasks. And so we're meeting our requirements, and we're doing okay. It's going to be a challenging couple of years to balance that as AETC increases production, and we try to increase our ability to absorb new people and turn them out 2 or 3 years later as experienced crew members.
Well, that's terrific. We've got a long list of questions. Again, you can elaborate and talk about what you want to talk about, but at the same time, just to get started with the Q&A, and we're starting to look at the folks that are up on the net. Please, as you come up, you can go to the hand raise function, unmute your mic, or you can write in questions as well. And we've got a good hour here to go back and forth, and I'm sure there'll be a terrific dialogue. So as a starter question, sir, how will Air Combat Command and our Air Force parse out aircraft investment, air power investment over the next decade across the CAF? We've got the F-35 and the F-15EX in production, plus the low-cost attributable aircraft, the Next Generation Air Dominance Program, and the Digital Century Series initiative or airplanes. You could start with that broad discussion or broad question. I think that'll kick us off.
Okay, well, thanks. And you've identified one of the key challenges that we face. And I'd start by saying that everything that we have in the Air Force, the COCOMs need and want. And we would like to be bigger. We'd like to have more of all our assets. And if we did, they could be useful around the world. So we're not big enough to meet all the COCOM requirement. And then in some cases, we're too big for the budget that we have. We're maintaining more force than we can modernize to keep relevant, or that we can operate to keep ready. And so we're always trying to balance that and find ways to go forward. And it's hard to field those new systems you talked about without the ability to retire old ones. So we have that conflict as we work through. And we've built, in the past year, we built a fighter roadmap, which was designed to lay out those choices and how we'll integrate new, how we'll retire old, and how we'll work through that. We're trying to transition to calling that more of a capabilities roadmap, because as you talk about low-cost attritables, or kind of runway independent airplanes, how will we blend those in? When will they replace our other airplanes, and how? And so we've got to work through the experiments with them and decide when they're ready, and what mission systems and sensors and weapons they need, and what the cost point would be to make that effective. And then balance, when do you run out of service life on airplanes, or when do they start to get unaffordable to sustain? And so we have a plan in Air Combat Command that we've worked several rounds through. We had a session today, actually, in the HAF to work through some of that with Chief Brown as he gets ready for POM deliberations and to decide how he wants to do it. And, preserving all the decision space for the Air Force and the Department and the Congress. I think there are options out there. I think we know we need to continue to acquire the F-35 to fly alongside our partners and allies, and to be able to bring the capabilities that that airplane brings. We know that the F-15C is running out of service life and has to be replaced. We have service life left on F-16s that they can still be useful. And then we know that the F-22, the world's greatest, air superiority airplane, has also been flying for 20 years or so. And if you think about the Digital Century Series, it's what are you going to replace? And the analysis is being done. The options are out there, and Chief Brown will make those decisions in the next, few months as we look at our next POM input.
Great. We've thanks again for the media being with us today. And so Rachel Cohen, if you're out there, we'll start with a media question. Okay, how about Steve Trimble?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
I can, Steve.
Great, well, thank you, and thank you for doing this evening. So I just wanted to sort of circle back on Reforge, and you've talked about that a few times, but one thing one part of it that I'm not sure I understand is the impact potentially on force structure. Can you by setting up the T7s in the FTUs, do you need additional aircraft to do that beyond what they've projected with the 351 or so? And we saw this sort of sliding scale when the contract was awarded, going up to over 400. So I'm just trying to understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, Steve, I'll try not to take too long, but I will talk to you a little bit about, what we're thinking about. Here's the story I tell. Lieutenant Holmes started F-15C FTU on the day before Thanksgiving in 1982. And 25 months later, in December of 1984, Lieutenant Holmes was an instructor in the F-15C. And that's because I had flown 500 hours in that time frame, about 250 hours a year. You can work that out. It's 20 plus hours a month working through there. And so I had gained the experience I needed to be an experienced pilot. We've flown less and less, and at the higher cost of operating airplanes, now we strive to fly our aircrew members 10 times a month or about 12 hours. So it takes them about twice as long to become ready, and it drives our shortage of experienced fighter pilots. I flew with the Israeli Air Force and their Air Academy, and we flew in one of their advanced trainers, and we flew an opposed two-ship surface attack tactics ride, and we flew together against constructive threats that showed up on our constructive avionics. We fought our way through air threats, ground threats. We did a simulated attack on a target. We came off and fought through air threats and then went back out, to feet dry. And they're able to train their pilots and get them to closer to experience before they ever go to FTU. So what we want to do is do an experiment along with Air Education and Training Command to try to figure out where's the best place and what's the best use of those T7s that we're going to start to acquire here in several years before we get them, so we can decide. So one option might be to take those T7s and put a mix of them at AETC bases to teach people how to fly them and check them out in them and do advanced bomber training, and then put some portion of them out at the fighter wings. One option might be to do that training at the AETC bases. We don't know yet, but we'd like to lease some advanced trainers with constructive avionics like we're looking at, and see if we can get the Lieutenant Holmes of the future that same number of flying hours and experience in the short time period at $5,000 a flying hour instead of at $25,000 or $30,000 a flying hour. Have them be an experienced 11F and then do a shorter transition course in the FTU out to an operational squadron. There's also benefits if you co-locate that at a fighter wing of being able to PCS that lieutenant there. No break-in training, they're joining a squadron. They fly until they're ready, and that's an open-ended time. Some people will be ready in a shorter term. Somebody might take a little longer to go to the FTU and then fly there in that same wing. And so they can be there longer on station, fewer moves on their family. We think that helps retention. And then maybe they go overseas, or maybe they stay there and teach in both airplanes. So we're going to figure out with the AETC, we have a great partnership with the folks there, and we want to figure out what's the best use and the best place to take advantage of the great capabilities that the T7 is going to give us.
But it sounds like it could be a wash. The current program of record for TX can support whether you go to the Reforge model or stay with the current system.
That's possible, and we want to go find out. We want to find out the best place and the best use. As AETC and my friends Brad Webb and Craig Wills are starting to do UPT 2.5 advanced, the classes have started there. They're going to fly the T6 a little longer. They're going to wing pilots at the end of that period at 8 months or so, and then they're going to go into advanced mobility track or advanced bomber track or advanced fighter track. And so they're looking at similar plans on how they would do it. And we're going to work through and decide, can we take people then and bring them to a fighter wing, or do we want to keep them there, and where's the best place to put the airplanes? We don't know yet. So we'd like to do an experiment with them and go figure it out.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. I see General Ellen Polakowski up raising her hand. General.
Yeah. Hey, Mobile. First of all, congratulations on an outstanding career. And it was a pleasure working with you. And I've been cheering from the sidelines for almost 2 years now. So I was curious whether you could I have actually two questions. You can answer both or neither or just one. The first is, the decision to buy the F-15X. Can you talk a little bit about what were some of the regrets? I know there were a lot of options about that, you know, in the decision to do that versus some of the other things. And the second one is a key part when I was there of the return to readiness had to do with the maintainers and the flight line maintenance. And I know you had started an experiment or a test case of realignment of the maintenance personnel at one of the bases, you know, eliminating the maintenance group, if you will. And I wonder if you could kind of give me an update. Haven't seen much on that, about how that has gone and what that impact had on readiness.
Sure. So I'll give you my version of events on the F-15 EX. And it starts with a study that OSD accomplished in Cape several years ago, where they went to look at the 4th gen, 5th gen mix for the services, for the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. And they did a study, and they did it two ways. They did it what they called bottom up, where they started with what were our original goals for the airplane. And so, for instance, they said on the Air Force, our goal was to replace all the F-16s and all the A-10s. And so that drove a number of airplanes we wanted. But by the time we started acquiring the airplane, we had downsized and we didn't have as many F-16s and A-10s. And so their bottom-up number was derived that way. And then they did a top-down number where they did analysis against the war plan scenarios. And they looked at where can you only use a 5th gen airplane and where could you use a 4th gen airplane. And they looked at what they thought the right mix should be cost effectively as we go forward in the future. And they determined that the buy rate for the Air Force to be able to keep up and make that mix work was around 48 5th gen airplanes a year. And that would give us enough to compete and to stay ahead as China started fielding 5th gen airplanes and, you know, stay ahead of Russia as they do it. And came up with a number for the Navy that was a little less than that because the Navy has a smaller force. But they said, hey, if the department buys that many airplanes together, that will be enough to keep the mix right. So, but then we looked at the age of our fleet overall, and because we hadn't bought many airplanes, our average age of our fleet was increasing every year, and we weren't buying enough new fighters every year to drive down that average age. It was actually still going up. And so we did a study, and we estimated that we needed to buy about 72 airplanes, new airplanes a year, to be able to start driving that average age down, which would drive the cost of sustaining it down and make it cheaper for us to operate that fleet. So we brought that to the Department of Defense, and they came back and said, okay, we understand that math, but we still have our 4th gen, 5th gen mix equation. And so if you're going to buy additional airplanes, we want to buy 4th gen airplanes. And there were several advantages of that, which was keeping multiple lines going for the industrial base. There were some advantages for us in that if you're transitioning the maintenance in a squadron, it takes a while to retrain people from an old airplane to a new airplane, but the F-15 to F-15 move, most of the airplane was common. Most of the TOs were the same. And if you're looking at an active unit, you know, it usually takes somewhere around a year or so to transition. If you're looking at a total force unit, a guard or reserve squadron with part-time maintainers and pilots, you have to schedule all those people through training, and it can take up to 3 years to transition if you're going to an all-new airplane. And so there were some advantages for us in doing it that way. And so the department programmed for us and put in the president's budget to increase the number of airplanes we're able to acquire, maintaining the number we needed in 5th gen to be able to keep up with our adversary, and then buying additional airplanes, 4th gen, to be able to keep up with the number we needed to start driving down the average age of our fleet. And the president's budget went over that way, and then Congress has the ultimate authority to decide how to, you know, equip our Air Force, and they've given us some of both, buying some extra F-35s and then buying some F-15EXs. On the maintenance side, you know, one of the first things we did when we were able to get some additional end strength and some additional funds on sustainment was to try to buy back maintenance manpower that had been cut. And, you know, before General Polakowski and I were sitting with the board of directors at Corona, the Air Force was faced with some tough decisions, and they decided to see if they could trade some manpower in the short term in order to pay for acquisition of the modernization that we needed. And, You know, if you ask Al Capone, you know, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. If you're going to cut manpower, you go to the places where there's lots of manpower. One of the places was maintenance, and one of the places was our logistics engine, our LRS squadrons. We went back and bought that maintenance manpower back to the point now that ACC squadrons are pretty close to fully manned in maintenance. They still have a overrepresentation of young maintainers, which we'll work our way through training to get to the experience level we want, but they're fully manned. To get to the org structure kind of questions, we had 2 or 3 goals we wanted to do. We wanted to empower squadron commanders. We wanted squadron commanders to learn early to make decisions on imperfect data and to have the opportunity to do that, because in the world we're moving into against peer adversaries, we knew we had to operate from multiple places to make their targeting problem harder. And so we were unlikely to operate in a big giant fixed base with multiple squadrons deployed there. So we wanted to help them prepare for that. We wanted to see if we could separate some of the staff work in the wing and squadrons from line work and let those squadron commanders focus on line work. So we created an A staff to help the wing commander perform those functions. And then we wanted to right-size squadrons. We had squadrons that had more than 1,000 airmen in them, with one squadron commander trying to keep up with them. And then we had squadrons where a squadron commander rated only 19 or 20 people and everybody else was in the OSS or the maintenance group or in a TFI partner unit with them. And so we wanted to see if we could right-size those. At Mountain Home, we tried it that way with putting ops and maintenance together, and it's worked fine. We have pushed scheduling and phase and analysis down into those squadrons, and they're responsible for their own fate, and they're accountable for it with the resources they have, and they compete with each other, and they're doing well. At Shaw, they came up with a different approach, and at Shaw, they split the aircraft maintenance squadron up into 3 pieces, and each of what we would have called aircraft maintenance units became its own squadron, a fourth generation squadron. And so now they have a squadron pair, a fourth generation squadron of roughly 300 airmen with the squadron commander that can know them and direct them, and an ops squadron. And if they're going to deploy, they're going to be teamed together. And so they practice every day making those decisions together at the squadron level. So I'm not married to one way or the other on exactly how we do the structure. What we are married to is trying to push authority, responsibility, and accountability, along with the resources and tools required to do it, down to the squadron level. And our wings are trying different ways to do that. And we're helping them work through that. And General Kelly, who's taken my place at some point in the future, will work with our wings that have tried the different approaches. And they'll sit down and figure out which ones they think have worked best. And then we'll see about standardizing that across Air Combat Command again.
Thanks, sir. I see General Newton has raised his hand. And before we go to you, sir, thanks for joining. Rachel Cohen now, our Air Force Magazine editor, is up. So Rachel first, and then we'll go to General Newton.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I've learned how to use computers now. So I'm curious, you know, sort of what was on your to-do list as commander that you weren't able to get across the finish line by your official end date? And, you know, do you have any sort of priorities that you would recommend to the next commander, you know, that are sort of emerging now that you weren't able to really get going on?
Well, you know, our overall priority was to try to prepare ACC for kind of the 21st century challenges and problems that we face. And so we were able to bring cyber over into Air Combat Command, and then we were able to align our cyber numbered Air Force with our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance numbered Air Force, and bring new tools together in information warfare and kind of the non-kinetic side. We're moving the conventional forces that were in 9th and 12th together into 15th next week, which will consolidate all our fighter, rescue, command and control forces in one numbered Air Force. That allows our service component NAFs in 1st Air Force to NORTHCOM, and 12th Air Force to SOUTHCOM, and 9th Air Force name will be realigned with our AFCENT that supports CENTCOM, and allows those commanders to focus on the task and on their primary task. And then we looked at a force presentation model to be able to present those forces, and how should we organize wings and squadrons underneath that. Under the kind of overall idea of, we wanted again to empower wing commanders and encourage them to take responsibility and give them more freedom to make decisions, and down to their group and their squadron commanders. And I think we were successful in those steps. And I think the proof in the pudding is when we handled Hurricane Michael down at Tyndall, Swinger Laidlaw was empowered and had the resources and tools to make the decisions he needed to safeguard and protect his fleet and people, and then to lead the recovery efforts and get flying again across the street at Eglin. And when we took on COVID here over the last 6 months, our wing commanders were empowered and had the tools to make the decisions that were right for their base and their area with their people, and to make kind of independent decisions and lead their folks through it. So I'm happy with what happened there, and I'm happy with kind of this refocus in Air Combat Command on pushing authority, responsibility, and decision down, and allowing our people to have autonomy, mastery, and purpose in what they do. If I could keep working on things as we go forward in the future, you know, there are some things in that roadmap, both on the fighter side and our ISR flight plan on what's the future of the mix between space and cyber and manned and publicly available information and unmanned aircraft to bring the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance tools that we need going forward. There are some decisions that need to be made there that the next COMAC will get to help make. And then over the last 6 months, you know, as we've kind of come face to face with the difference between the Air Force we aspire to be and the Air Force we sometimes are, with the evidence here of, you know, after the death of George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd and other Americans, we've come to terms with the fact that we still have some things to do in our Air Force and some things to do in Air Combat Command. We had a conference here this week, Sword Athena, where the women in Air Combat Command came together to address family and women's issues that keep them from fully contributing. You know, if I had more time, if I was going to stick around longer, I would really love to be more a part of these efforts to help us reach closer to our ideal of being a place where we can take people from anywhere in our country, from any racial background, from any economic background, and give them an equal opportunity to work hard and move out and become the best person they can be. You know, I'm proud of our Air Force. We've made great strides, but I think talking to our airmen over this last 6 months with a fresh impetus to do that, you know, I can't escape the fact that we still have a ways to go, and I would love to have the opportunity to keep working on that.
Terrific. Thanks, sir. General Newton, you still out there?
Oh, I'm still here, loud and clear. Thank you very much. And General Holmes, thank you so much. Again, great career, as I said earlier. And you were doing all these wonderful things. And I tried to have them let me get back in so we could work together again. And they told me they weren't taking old guys. So I missed that opportunity. But again, so many thanks. You just answered the question that I was going to put on the table. And excuse me, you've been in the forefront of in this area with reference to social problems that we're still dealing with in our Air Force and of course in our nation. And for that, I just want to tip my hat to you and say, again, thank you so very much for leading, being one of the leaders and really leading this effort. And we will continue to be a strong Air Force. Again, it's amazing the kinds of things and how far down the field you've helped to move the ball to get it down there. So again, very, very proud of all of that. I was going to ask the question about that, but you've already answered it. So again, I will sign off and let someone else ask another question. But the very best to you and your family, and thanks to Orville, to you and the folks for putting together Friday evening. This all we need to do now is be in the Officers Club, and it'll be old days again.
Well, General Newton, thank you for tuning in, and thanks for your leadership. You know, for everybody, I got to work for General Newton when he was the wing commander at Holloman. I got to fly with him. More than that, I got to watch him, and you know, he was in great demand, traveling all over the country to address these issues and speak and teach. And we owe him a great debt, and he's continued to remain involved in it and to mentor and teach guys like me, again, as we try to close that gap. So thank you, sir, and thanks for the kind words.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, sir, from AFA for being here. General Newton was there 40 years ago when Kerry and I first met in the Pentagon, and we'll never forget your encouragement along the way. So,
yes, absolutely. Was that long ago?
Amazing. Well, we've got a number of great questions and people raising their hands, so I get to pick and choose. Here's one that I really like from Eric Tagler at Forbes. Eric's been told by his DARPA counterparts that there's a lot of interest and work going on in the 1v1 scenario we're about to have between an AI fighter aircraft and an F-16. And pretty interesting for all of us. I'm sure you've been engaged in how at least the planning for that engagement has gone forward. I'm sure to leverage the incredible capabilities that come along with AI, as well as make sure that every part of our combat air forces, including F-16s, are as capable as possible. So, sir, go ahead. Any perspective would be very helpful.
Yeah, was it Eric? Did he have a specific question he wanted to ask, or?
Well, just to read it the way he asked, he's been told by Colonel Javorcik of DARPA's Strategic Technology Office that DARPA cannot share even outlines of the parameters for the Alpha dogfight trial slated for next week. And if information about the ground rules, specifics of the 1v1 scenario that pits a human F-16 pilot against artificial intelligence are not shared, how can U.S. Air Force pilots have any confidence in the value, veracity of the exercise?
Well, I think we'll work through it, Eric. And you know, I'm not in the lab or the people that are running it, but you know, I usually tell people that we have artificial intelligence in our airplanes now. If you're flying the Raptor works its radar, it builds a shoot list for you of targets. You go through and you can adjust that and work through it. But our pilots, our aviators, they get help from artificial intelligence systems already. You know, we've flown auto ground collision avoidance systems. We've experimented with systems that when you get in close, it'll finalize a guns tracking solution for you and move the flight controls to do that. I think that's something that we're not strangers to. The next step is to see what can it take on from there and how far can you work that out? When can you hand it to the airplane to arrive to that solution that you want? And I'm all for the test. As we look at how we're going to bring those pilots' assistance in, and then how we might move toward a more autonomous vehicle, one of our ideas is that we'd like to try it in red air first. So we'd like to take it and see if there are ways to do some unmanned adversaries against our manned aircraft, and then let them learn and train their algorithms and see how good they get at fighting against us. So I see the test that's coming on as a part of that effort. And yeah, they'll have to nail down some parameters. They'll have to put some limits on it, and we'll work through that, but it's a step along the way. We're definitely going to have more AI and machine learning in our airplanes. I think it'll start with pilots' assistance that will be recommending solutions. I think we'll see the same thing in our command and control systems, where an artificial intelligence will recommend an option to the command and control people, and they'll decide whether to take it or not. And then we'll move more and more, and we'll see if we can hand more and more autonomy off. Kind of the same thing we see in self-driving cars, where they range a little bit from keeping you in your lane and not letting you get too close in the autopilot, up to being able to, you know, go from one place to another without any help. So I'm not exactly sure what the parameters are, partly because of COVID and limits on travel. I had planned to try to go and be a part of it, but we'll be tuning in digitally to it now, or virtually.
Great. Thanks, sir. And next hand up, Matthew Mastronardi. If you'd identify yourself, Matthew, and please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Wonderful. General Holmes, I appreciate you taking the time to be here and, you know, sharing your expertise. It's truly an honor to be given an opportunity to pick your brain a little bit, especially after such an astounding career. So yes, my name is Senior Airman Matthew Mastronardi. I'm stationed over at Joint Base Andrews, in your neck of the woods, sir. I've been seeking a commission for the past year. I was a non-select last year. Currently, I'm doing everything I know and can to prepare myself for the future. So with that, I have one question.
Sure.
What leadership advice do you have for an airman who wants to make positive and effective impacts?
You know, that's a great question. And, you know, the usual advice that I give people, and I'll try to think about the direct leadership of that. You know, the usual advice that I give people is that, hey, the first thing you want to do if you have ambition and you want to make a positive impact is learn to do the job the Air Force has given you really well. Show the people you work with and show your supervisor that you can do that job really well and you can be trusted to do it. and then be ready when they ask you, what do you want to do next? And what I tell them is that second question doesn't happen unless you do the first part. If you're not doing your job that you've been given to do really well, nobody cares what you want to do next. But beyond that, you know, I would say look for leadership opportunities, look for chances to take on more responsibility. And that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, volunteering to raise money or do the booster club. It means look for opportunities to lead in your mission area. Young aviators usually are standing at the desk saying, hey, can I lead today? You know, when you show up and you're flying on Orville's wing, you say, hey, Orville, you look tired today. Do you mind if I lead a little bit? Part of it to try to get a chance to lead something. So I think do your job you've been given the best you can. And when you see an opportunity that you think you could lead and participate in, ask, because people are busy. And often with the supervisor, if they have somebody that they trust that will take something off their plate, they're perfectly willing to let them do it. Thanks for the question, and good luck to you. I'm an OTS guy, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, General.
Thanks, sir. Next up, Dan Clark. And Dan, again, if you'd please give us your background, go ahead.
I just had to jump on. I've met Mike, General Holmes, when you were at Seymour Johnson. And after General Wright weighed in, I want to weigh in as a civic leader. I spoke at Corona the very first time when General Jumper was around, about 2004 or so, and Hal Hornberg was Air Combat Commander at the time. And as you know, I've spoken at every MAGCOM commander's call all over the world many, many times. And you clearly are one of the smartest human beings who ever lived, and every four-star will tell you that. But my question, General, is, as I visit a base, as I've been around the world, and a four-star at the end of my trip to the base says, Clark, what can we do for you? I say, I always want to visit your office. And they look at me like, why? And after a 40-year career, sir, I want to know what still makes your wall. After every single move, what award, what photograph, what aircraft model has made it to every single one of your offices, because as we all know, when you look at that symbol, it immediately triggers a story. So because you're talking about AI, we all know that the most powerful intelligence is not artificial, it's still people. And with you, with the reputation of being so left brain, so smart, I know your personality, I know your relationship, I know your love for the airmen. Will you please tell me one story that links to whatever has continuously made your wall, made your office after all these moves, that has inspired you to be one of the legendary four-stars of all time?
Well, I think you're exaggerating a little bit, Dan, but for everybody, you know, Dan is, you've read some of Dan's work. You may not know it, the Chicken Soup for the Soul volumes. Dan was a great author there, and then he's volunteered countless hours to come help airmen. When he came to Goldsboro, he spent about 30 minutes with me asking me what I cared about and what were my themes and what did I want to teach my airmen. And then I sent him out to fly in an F-15 and took him straight to the speech. And he gave a speech that said everything I would want to say to my airmen, but wasn't good enough to say in a better way than I can do it. So Dan's a master at telling stories and use them. And I've tried to learn a little bit from him. And I'm going to look around here briefly. And I'm a little handicapped because I packed most of my office out already. But I have a picture on the wall back here that is, I'm going to show you. My PA guys, they're supposed to be invisible. I'm not supposed to show them, but Colonel Sheets is sitting there. But this picture is a picture of a fountain that, Dan, you saw when we were at Seymour Johnson. And it's a fountain that has 4 airplanes in a missing man formation and a old B model painted up to look like a Strike Eagle in the back. And that picture has gone with me ever since my time there as the wing commander. And that's the kind of thing you put in your office that reminds you every day when you walk in. When I walk in my door, that's in front of me. It reminds me of the cost of the decisions that I make and of the cost of the things that we do as leaders in the Air Force, and reminds us to, you know, to try to work hard that day and to try to be worthy of it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. God bless you.
Well, thanks,
Thank
Dan,
you.
and
Great-
thanks, sir.
great
We got
input.
got a number of hands up. Thankfully, we've got about another 20 minutes to go, but lined up here, we've got, it looks like Andrew McKenna and John Maluta and Rev Jones. So let's go with John Maluta.
We only have 20 minutes. If we're going to get John Maluta up. I don't know if that'll be enough. Go ahead, John.
I tried to frame the ATO here. Go ahead, John. He's a calm guy. Seems like he would be able to do this. Well, we'll keep you on standby, John. Andrew McKenna.
Yeah, thank you very much, General Wright, and thanks to you and for the Air Force Association and all you do in communicating the policies and important matters. I just wanted to ask General Holmes, what do you think that we can do better? A lot of members of the media and lawmakers and other advocates of air power, what can we do to get the message out even further beyond what General Wright does so well with AFA and General Veptul with the Mitchell Institute? Where do you think some of the gaps and the holes are that we can do to better communicate the air power message? And thanks again for a great career. It's great to see you again.
Well, thank you, Andrew. And, for everybody, Andrew donates a lot of his time and resources toward carrying the Air Force message and a lot of his time and resources toward getting out with our heritage flight and being out there and showing air power to people. So thanks, Andrew, and thanks for dialing in with us today. We certainly love Air Force Association and the grassroots things that they do and the magazine and the things that they do on the Hill to communicate. The Mitchell Society's out there every day fighting. In ACC, we have a civic leaders group that represents all of our bases. And one of the things that you learn is that, if I'm the wing commander in the state, I go see the governor and I call him governor. And when that civic leader's with me, they call him Joe or Bob or Jim or Mary. And they talk about their kids and they have the real influence there. So we depend on our relationship with those communities. But, ultimately, I think it comes down to each one of us to tell people that we're around, to tell the people that we live next door to tell our families, to talk about what's important. And, Andrew, you didn't quite ask me this, but I'll tell you, 2 weeks away from retirement, the biggest concern I have as we go forward for our Air Force is that the natural tendency is not to let us get rid of anything and to write into law or requirements that we cannot possibly retire anything old. And it's going to be really hard to field the new capabilities and get the new training that we need to make airmen ready to face the threats, both the conventional threats that we normally talk about in Air Combat Command. But let's face it, the primary battleground right now in our competition with peer adversaries is the information space. So the things that we're doing in 16th Air Force, converging ISR and cyber into information warfare tools, all of those things we have to modernize. We have to train our people to do new things. And so we really want to work and we want to get the message out to our decision makers in Congress to, we have to have help doing that. We have to have some freedom of action to do that. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. Rev Jones.
Hey, General Holmes, how you doing today?
Hi, Rev. Now, actually, Rev is the smartest person in the world.
Not exactly true, and we can talk about that later. Hey, sir, we see a lot in the media. We see a lot of discussion that tends to be platform focused. Every OV1 that I see that addresses Joint All-Domain Command and Control or ABMS has a lot of reliance on the connectivity that will pull all this together. And so I'm interested in any thoughts you might be able to share with us on the roadmap or the thoughts about moving towards advanced tactical data links, those agile assured communications that will actually help us enable some of this great vision that we've talked about in JADC2.
Well, if you look at the briefings that our ABMS team is putting out with the Air Force, contributions into JADC2, you'll see that they're really focused on the connectivity. And that's part of what General Jones, my good friend Rev, talked about here, is that they're focused on laying in the backbone that information can be shared on, and they're focused on conditioning data to make sure that data is available to people, and that ultimately we'll be able to get the right piece of data to the right shooter through the right command and control node to be able to make a fast decision. And that work is important, and we have to lay out the backbone. We have to lay out the data pathways and the storage and the way to go find that information and get it to people. But I think the next step is to take that and actually bring people and the systems that are run on top of that do command and control. connectivity is part of that, and being able to link to people is part of it. But we also have to make sure that whatever we acquire there and whatever we build in the architecture of connectivity, that we're thinking about how real people will command and control real assets as we go forward. So, Rev, in the world we're in with software-defined radios, I don't think we'll be buying more radios. I think we'll be teaching software-defined radios how to talk to each other. I think we'll be able to move away from some of the gateways that mechanically link one data link to another data link by having both data links be able to use the computer that they're on to translate and work through it in connectivity. And you take that all the way back to our network, that the digital backbone that the whole Air Force runs in. And I think we're going to have to take another look at the way we organize that whole enterprise and move away from firewalls and trying to defend every inch of the perimeter of all our comm systems to securing data at rest and securing data as it moves, and what the experts like our comm generals would talk about as zero trust networks, because right now the backbone of the compliance that it takes to defend every portion of our network is crushing the performance of it. And so we're going to have to find new ways to do it. ABMS is going to help us do that, but it's a bigger issue than that. And I don't know if I answered your question, Rev, but like I said, you're the smartest guy in the world, and you probably already know the answer. Anyway.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, Rev.
Sir, I appreciate feedback, and I just want to add my thanks to you and Sarah for everything you've done. We're looking forward to catching up with you guys when you transition and maybe having an adult beverage or two. But thanks.
You bet, Rev. Thanks.
I should have added that on this afternoon. The next roll call, I think it's going to be adult beverages are certainly optional and not encouraged. So we have also our AFA state president for the state of Texas, retired Chief Master Sergeant Paul Westlow. And he just simply asked, and I would ask you too, what can your Air Force Association do based on your experience and going forward to really fulfill and achieve our mission to support dominant air and space forces, airmen and space professionals, and their families?
Well, I think, it kind of goes back a little bit to Andrew McKenna and his question and what's the next step for us. And there's some technical parts of this and different kinds of government nonprofit organizations and what they're allowed to do and who they can talk to and how it works. And I'm not going to get into that, but, I think we're going to have to make some tough choices as we go forward. And our natural inclination is that, we focus on our platform, or we focus on our base, or we focus on the specific parts of it. And, when the leaders of China are sitting together and thinking about how they're going to counter us, they're able to start with what they want to do and go do it, while we're working through, a board of directors of 535 people and all the communities where we live. I think it's going to take some work together to start with the big picture of what we want to accomplish and kind of get us all on the same page if we're going to move together. That's kind of where we need to go, I think, for the future of the Air Force. But ultimately, we really love everything that AFA does and local chapters do for our airmen where you are. Our local chapter here at Langley, runs a great series of professional development sessions for our airmen. And I know that they do that in Texas. And I think that's just as valuable as trying to think about the resources that our airmen and families need to try to be the best version of themselves they can be, because we need their best every day. So thanks to the folks in Texas, and I know you're busy out there.
Thanks, sir. David Gonzalez has been waiting here with his hand up. David, if you would identify yourself, and hopefully you're still there.
Thank you. I am here, General Wright and General Holmes. I'm not an airman, but I am the father of one that I got on here simply to thank you again. I'm the father of Eric Speedy Gonzalez, Thunderbird number 8, who had a landing mishap. You came up to me and you told me everything was going to be okay, and it is. And I thank you and the Air Force. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. It's great to talk to you. That was a scary time for all of us. And Speedy was involved in an incident on the runway there in Dayton, Ohio. And his teammates ran to the sound of it, as usual.
Incredible.
His squadron commander held his hand while they took the airplane apart with him in it. His flight died.
A live ejection seat.
Yep. his flight doc worked through the hole to keep him alive and to get him to the hospital, and then intervened again at the hospital. And it was an honor for me to meet you, sir, and to be with your family there for a minute. And I've had a chance to see Speedy since then, and he's doing great. And my son, who's a young pilot in the Air Force, sent me some pictures from Tucson. You know, here I am with Speedy not too long ago. So it's great to hear from you again, sir. And we're proud of Speedy and proud of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Air Force. Thank you, General.
And oh man, the good stuff. John Hoffman's out there. I'll just read his question. How does the Skyborg program fit in with aircraft and force multipliers? And any thoughts on operational timelines and initial mission goals, scenarios, engagement doctrine for the Skyborg program?
Well, Skyborg kind of is an umbrella that brings together the low-cost unmanned attritable systems, or runway independent systems, as some people are starting to call them in the Air Force. And it's an umbrella that lets us bring multiple contractors together with multiple ideas and start sorting through them. And one of the key things from my perspective is figuring out the swap, or the traits, or the knee in the curve, however you want to describe it, between capabilities on that airplane and then what's affordable. So how much do you have to fit into the kill chain and to fill a niche that will allow us to replace something else? But how expensive can it get before it's no longer attritable or low cost? And I think the Skyborg program will let us spend some money through multiple contractors with multiple approaches and have some competition of ideas and of systems, and try to drive some progress there. In our roadmap, we're ready to talk about introducing those systems as they start to prove themselves, and we answer that question of what do they need and what cost point can we afford, and how do we bring those two things together. And I think that's what Skyborg will let us do.
Terrific. Got time for one more question, and then I've got a few comments before General Holmes winds up. So see Dave Brogg with his hand up. Dave. Apparently can't dial in. So let me go to Tom Monder. Tom wrote in and said, General Holmes, thank you for your service and for being here today. I've read about Red Air contracts. Do you see that capability expanding? And what is the estimate of savings using contract adversaries versus in-house?
Yeah, so the big savings we get out of Red Air is in training capacity. So anytime that we're training together in our fighter fleet, if you don't have a dedicated adversary, then somebody pretends to be the adversary. And so if you were flying, the worst version of that would be half of the time you're flying, you're emulating a Chinese pilot or a Russian pilot or, a North Korean pilot, and not training to the full extent of your capabilities and not being the training audience for that training. So we have dedicated aggressor squadrons that take on that role and give us some relief from it, but we don't have enough of them to meet all the requirements. So in the past, we've had to task our operational units to go spend some part of their precious flying hours doing that. And in our flying training units, where we're teaching people brand new how to fly the F-15 or the F-16 or the F-35 or the F-22, every sortie you spend with an instructor pretending to be an adversary is a sortie you can't spend training a new pilot. So a contract approach is a way to ease that burden and allow us to get more benefit out of the precious flying training sorties and hours we have, and use that for more Blue Air training. It is expensive. I won't say it's cheaper, but what it does allow us to do is to make the most use out of the sorties and hours that we have for training our pilots. And we've let our first contracts for an expanded program, and we will concentrate first at those flying training units because that's where it makes the biggest difference. That will allow us to take more pilots out of undergraduate pilot training and put them through the flying training unit and get them out into an ops unit. And that's why we've targeted the flying training units first.
Great, thanks, sir. I see Vicki McCall just raised her hand from Utah. So Vicki, please. And I hope we can hear you. I still show you on mic muted, Vicki. Okay, we can come back to Vicki. A question that sort of broadly describes, the collaboration and coordination requirements, the training opportunities that then lead to going to war together. Some thoughts on how Air Combat Command and across the CAF will continue to coordinate, and I know you do, and collaborate with Global Strike Command, but also bring in the Space Force and the space units that are in the Space Force. So fighter, bomber, space, and obviously that's both lethal and non-lethal integration of capabilities, including 16th Air Force. So some thoughts on that might be great.
Thanks, Orville. You know, in the past, we used a term, the CAF, the Combat Air Forces, that kind of defined the fighter and bomber enterprise. You know, frankly, with the change in nature of warfare and with the competition space, including more and more information warfare, that term has been less useful. You know, we've discussed, well, does that only apply to what it used to, or does it now include a broader set of people? In general, I favor the broader set of people that are now in the Combat Air Forces. And right now, we're conducting 2 red flag exercises at the same time, one up in Alaska with coalition partners, and then one down in the Las Vegas area that is dedicated to U.S. forces from across the services. And that's one of the great places that we do it. We work together there in large force training opportunities against a simulated threat environment, and we hone our skills together and we practice the teamwork that'll be required both with our international partners and with our other joint service partners. So that's certainly one of the important ways to do it. We've also done some exercises. We had our Atlantic Trident series of exercises that we've hosted here at Langley, where the Royal Air Force and the French Air Force have come in with Typhoons and Mirages, and we've flown together here with F-22s and F-35s. This great benefit of the international partners in the F-35 enterprise means that we have built-in partners with an airplane that we understand together and that can communicate with each other if we pay attention to the details and work through that and make it work. But that partnership will be one of the backbones of our ability to cooperate with our allies and partners around the world, is by partnering together on that F-35.
Well, thank you, sir, and thank you to everyone today. What a wonderful afternoon. We've got dozens of questions lined up, and again, 500 plus folks on the net on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. So as your AFA president, for certainly for you, General Holmes, and for Sarah and the family, and a great F-16 pilot that's going to follow in your shoes, thank you. Before you close out a little bit, though, since I am the AFA president, we wanted to toast you and send you on your way as now an appointed senior trusted advisory to the AFA president. So to General Holmes, and I know all of you out there virtually would join me in a toast to a great warfighter, every airman a warrior, and a warrior that's an exemplar for all of us. So to General Mobile Holmes, thanks, sir. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you, Orville. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Lots of great friends out there. There were great friends and names that we didn't get to talk to. Thanks to all of you. I have been a very fortunate man to have been able to spend 39 years of my life as part of this community and the people that have been around it. And I will be forever grateful just to be with you, Orville, with the people like you, the people that fly and fix airplanes and support bases and do cyber and do ISR and do all the things that the nation depends on. I will miss them, and I will miss having a chance to do events like this. So thanks to everybody, including, the defense press. Thanks for your efforts to help us tell our story. Thanks for your efforts to understand what we're trying to do and get our information out there. And I'm glad I got a chance to talk to some of you today too. So thanks, everybody.